You see, I am a simple high school student living with my family. I was very enthusiastic about the release of Pokemon Heart Gold and Soul Silver here in the States, so I purposely locked myself out of all media and the internet aside for school purposes. That means no 4chan, no YouTube, no Bulbapedia, etc. I was busy with the school year and being poor at the time, so I wasn't able to buy Soul Silver on launch date. After my school year ended, I ordered Soul Silver on Amazon. However, it would take a week for it to arrive. I decided that during that time I would replay my Crystal version on my Game Boy Color. However, I realized that long ago my mom threw it away because I told her the save went and died, and I was very upset about it then. She also threw away my Silver version, so all I have left is my Game Boy Color. As such, I set out to GameStop and bought a used Silver version, as it's the only Pokemon game left that they have for Game Boy Color. $10, fairly cheap despite it being GameStop. I went home and started up for a nostalgia trip, but that's where things started getting bizarre. The Game Freak logo started up as normal, but it just froze there. I thought the cart was errored or something, so I turned it off and on, and the same thing happened. I tried pressing A and start over and over and over again, along with all the buttons. Eventually, the logo vanished, and it was a black screen for about 5 seconds. Suddenly, rather than going to the usual menu screen, I was already in the game in a previous save file, which was odd as I was expecting all these cards to have been wiped out by the poor battery. Either way, I wasn't complaining as I would have chosen continue option to see what the previous guy did anyways. I checked his trainer information, his name was just ... didn't have originality. Checked his profile, and apparently he had 999 hours and 99 minutes put into the game, as with all 16 badges, 9,999 Pokédollars, and all 251 Pokemon on the Pokédex. Seeing as how he apparently had Mew and Celebi logged, I also thought he was either using a Game Genie, or was a really hardcore Pokemon player back in the day. I checked his Pokemon to see what team he had. To my surprise, I saw 5 unknowns, and a 6th Pokemon named Hurry. I'm thinking this must be some cruel joke by the person who last played the game, so I decided to check the profiles of those Pokemon anyways. As I expected, they were all different letters of unknowns. All level 5. I was a bit shaky with my unknown alphabet, but I eventually spelled out the word to be L, E, A, V, E. Leave. As for the 6th Pokemon, it was a Cyndaquil named Hurry. Mind you, this was before individualized Pokemon icons. The Cyndaquil looked normal, but it was level 5, had 1 HP left, and only 2 attacks. Leer and Flash. I don't know why they named him Hurry, but at the time I just disregarded it. The most eerie thing was that despite my volume being at max, none of the Pokemon had their usual cries. Just pure silence. Having enough of that, I closed the menu. I was parked at what appears to be a room inside Bellsprout Tower. However, for some reason, there were no NPCs around. Even more eerie was that the pillar in the middle didn't move at all. It was just leaning on its side. There was no music, and there was no exit or ladder. At least I thought that there wasn't. I walked around for a few minutes, but I can't seem to find a way out. There was certainly not a room I've ever seen in the Bellsprout Tower before. I tried checking my items for an escape rope, but the bag was completely empty. There was no wild Pokemon either. Or at least none that I can see. I walked around for a few minutes before I found a ladder. It turned out to be behind the pillar, and the screen turned black, and finally some music started playing. I had a sudden chill as I recognized that melody I heard to be the theme you hear when you listen to the radio at the Alph Ruins where the unknown are. I immediately realized it wasn't a loading transition, but rather it was a dark room in which I would need Flash. Before I took care of that, though, I immediately checked my Pokegear to change the radio to something more pleasant. But as it turns out, there was no radio card, or even a phone or time cards. There was only a map card in which Gold was simply walking in the midst of black. Creepy. I recall that Cyndaquil had Flash, so I turned off my Pokegear and made Cyndaquil use Flash. I didn't see any message saying Hurry used Flash or anything like that. The room just became lit, just like that, and I soon regretted it. The room was a chilling blood red with a linear gray path leading to the south. The ladder I used to go up and down was not there anymore. I had no choice but to head south. The screen got darker every 20 steps I made, until finally I made it to the end, which just appears to be endless. It kept getting darker while I head down the hall, until I eventually reached a sign. I read the sign, pressed A, and it said, "Turn back now, yes or no." Suddenly I was asked to answer the question, but there was no question asked. So I chose yes, as I did not know what it was asking. The screen went black again, and made a ladder climbing sound. The unknown radio music stopped, and in a few seconds it was replaced with not as creepy Pokeflute radio music. I was in another dark room, but I held my breath and used flash again. Suddenly it said, "Hurry, has fainted," which was odd since I recall there was no status conditions like poison on him, and in fact, after a bit of investigating, I realized something. None of my original Pokemon were there, but instead all were replaced with level 10 unknown. I did the same thing as before and spelled out the unknown. My then team of unknowns spelled out H E D I E D. He died. Either way, after that creepy change, the room was lit to reveal myself in a very small room that appears to be only 4 squares big. The room of that wall was gray bricks, as if I were inside something that was hollowed out. I recognized this quickly as the graveyard from Pokemon Red and Blue. I already concluded this was clearly a hacked game and had some sadistic craphead sold it to GameStop. However, my curiosity kept me going. I checked the trainer profile of ... again only to find out that the sprite of Gold was missing his arms. He also seems to be less smug, or rather seems more sad and empty in a way that I do not know how to describe. For some reason, he also had 24 badges, which was clearly impossible. After a few minutes of aimless wandering, my character suddenly spun and did the escape rope animation. Instead of flying up, though, my character spun down. After that screen, the music stopped. Finally landing, the overworld sprite of Gold is colored differently now. Instead of his usual red color he dons, he appears suddenly white now, including his skin, as if he came straight from the colorless Game Boy games placed into a colored background of the Game Boy Color. I checked his trainer profile again, and now it's as if his white overworld sprite, he's lost his legs and appears what to be bloody tears in his eyes. It also says he now has 32 badges, which now starts to disturb me, as this change of number seems to represent something important. I also checked my Pokemon, and this time contains 5 unknowns and a level 100 Celebi without a nickname. The unknown this time are level 15, and spelled out the phrase D Y I N G, dying. I checked the Celebi's profile. It was a shiny Celebi, except there's only one half of the sprite. 1 leg, 1 arm, 1 eye. It only has 1 attack. Perish Song. The area I was in itself was the Sprout Tower with an immobile pillar as before. Except everything's apparently red now. There are also no wild Pokemon to be found, and no NPCs. I walked north for what felt like forever. It stretched on endlessly. Until eventually, I came across some generic men and women NPCs. They were all lined up to the side, just facing the long slantish pillar in the middle. They were also white, but nothing happens when you try to speak to them. I kept on going north until eventually the pillar just stopped. It appears to be chopped off as if someone killed the giant Bellsprout, and it transparent red in that spot. I went up to red without even pressing A, and it suddenly engaged in battle. Nothing wants to battle. The music starts again with what sounds like the unknown radio music, but played backwards. Gold's battle back sprite matches his front one with the bloody tears, white skin, and lack of arms, while red sprite was the same as in gold, silver, and crystal, except transparent. His text simply says, "wants to battle," as if he has no name, and both of us only have one Pokemon each. Which is weird, as I swore I had 6 with the unknowns. My shiny Celebi came out, conveniently, with half a sprite for the back sprite also. The shiny noise and animation was different, as the sounds it made multiple screech noises, as used consecutively. Red sent out a seemingly normal male Pikachu, except he's level 255, his sprite seems sad, and he has tears in his eyes. Rather than the usual fight item Pokemon Run thing, I was given only the option to use attacks. Since Celebi only has one, I chose it. Naturally, since Pikachu was level 255, he went first. Pikachu used Curse, lowering his speed, and his other stats. I'm not even sure if Pikachu could use Curse. Pikachu's attack went up. His defense went up too. Both Pokemon will faint in 3 turns, as Celebi used Perish Song. At this point, I didn't go back to the fight menu. The battle just continued on without me. Also note that there were no animations at all for some reason. Pikachu used Flail. It didn't do much damage despite his level, and boost his health was maxed. Celebi used Perish Song, but nothing happens that it was already used. Pikachu used Frustration, which did a crap ton of damage, knocking Celebi down to less than 10 HP. Celebi used Pain Split, which surprised me as Celebi didn't even have the attack in the first place. Now Celebi and Pikachu both have about 150 HP. Pikachu used Mean Look, not like that did anything. As expected, due to the effects of Perish Song, my Celebi has fainted, except in the text it said Celebi has died. And instead of the ordinary drop-off screen animation, the Celebi backstrike just vanished. For some reason, the Pikachu was still up even with Perish Song, and it didn't count as my loss. Pikachu was more different beyond attack that 5 attack limit. Pikachu used Destiny Bond. Afterwards, it said Pikachu has died, and a slow fade out animation. Apparently he was the winner as Transparent Red showed up and said ... At that point I freaked out and the Transparent Red sprite was suddenly beheaded, leaving nothing but his pale white body. The battle then ended and at that point faded out along with the music. I'm back in the overworld with another change to Gold sprite, as apparently now Red's overworld sprite. I quickly changed Gold's profile, where this time the only thing that remains of him is his head with a transparent skin. The head was zoomed in a bit, showing a black void in his eyes. It now stated he now has 40 badges. I then headed back, and I checked all my Pokemon. They were all level 20 shiny unknowns. When spelled out, spelled L-O-R-E. No more. I was at what I now know is next to the end. There's apparently no music playing, but for some reason I still felt like something was there and that could be heard. I was back in my room in New Bark Town. Maybe finally I get to play this game properly, but who am I kidding? I knew that sadistic craphead who had hacked the game had done something. I walked around my room to interact with things, as I'm a bit afraid to go down the stairs to see what was awaiting there. Note I said walked, as while the background was moving, Gold was not moving his transparent limbs as he was doing so, just like those floating ghosts you see in Diamond and Pearl. As expected, the radio, computer, and TV didn't work, so I had no choice to go down the stairs. I ended up in the same lower level as the room in my house, Everything appears normal. Except Mom isn't home. After failing to interact with anything in this room, as I was sure I wasn't be able to, I headed outside. To my surprise, that door leading outside to the south didn't work. Instead, I just walked straight out it through the void. I continued moving south to see what the heck was going on. My house vanishes as I head south into the void. It was creepy. When I entered the void, the outline on Gold's transparent sprite turned white to contrast with the pitch black. Eventually, I reached a white area where Gold's sprite turned black and transparent again. I continued south without thinking of stopping at all. After a long trek south, I finally encountered something. It was Gold's regular sprite. I talked to it. He said goodbye forever and vanished. As it happened, it said question mark used nightmare, which at that point I would not deny that being possible. Gold did another escape rope animation, spinning slowly downwards as before. Now I'm back in that small hollowed-out room surrounded by graves earlier. Or at least I say I was back there, but there's no sprite anymore. I tried to walk around, but nothing happened. Not even a wall bumping noise. I checked my trainer profile again. But after pressing start, I soon regretted it. There was no gold sprite left. It said I have 0 badges, and all the pictures of the Johto gym leaders were suddenly skulls. So, having enough of that, I exited the menu. I checked my Pokemon, which were all level 25 unknown. As I expected, it spelled out a phrase that I dared to read. It spelled out, I am D E A D. I'm dead. As soon as I pressed the start button to go back to the overworld, the room I was supposedly in was then covered with the same blocks as the walls. Then I figured out what exactly that room was. Final text said, "Rest in peace." The room was a big grave, surrounded by other graves. Gold has already been dead. He died presumably a few years after he defeated Red. He was a young trainer who, despite his efforts in collecting so many badges and attempts at becoming a Pokemon master, was still unable to avoid the inevitable fate of death, and his efforts were eventually forgotten by the next generation.